tonight. Uh, I'm going to share a little bit of information about the history of our committee, and then Tammy Besser, who is a licensed clinical social worker at JCFS, who works in the area of supports and services for people with disabilities, will speak a bit. She is a consultant to our committee. Jackie's going to share some information about upcoming events, and then I'd like to wrap it up with a couple of questions about how we can work together in the future. So Marcy has been around and involved in the committee for quite a while, Marcy Dickman, and she's not available tonight. So I just want to let you know, probably at least since 2009, but I'm sure further back than that, there have been lots of work being done in the area of inclusion, and starting with the integration of students with special needs into the classrooms at Abate Safer. I think there was a synagogue-wide survey at one point to assess the needs of the congregants, and some work done based on those responses. A formal inclusion committee began in 2013, and just to quickly go through some of the work we've done, and they've done even before I joined in, was usher and staff training. We've increased inclusive practices for the holidays, high holidays, and other services. We've been actively involved in making recommendations to make sure the building is accessible. There have been a lot of educational programs and workshops for both Abate Safer and the larger congregation. We've examined and edited the Beth Emmet website and communication, created an inclusive Purim, increased labeling of food, and we've sponsored speakers and programs for February's Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. So that's some of the work we've done, the highlights of the work we've done. But I really want to make sure we have time for Tammy to talk a bit about inclusion in ways that our work intersects with a lot of the work done through the Social Justice Committee, Social Action Committee. Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome. And Becky, please edit if I say something off the cuff that shouldn't be recorded. I'm well known for that. It's a habit that I'm not sure. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it isn't. So on the Inclusion Committee, we talk about accessibility, we talk about disability, and I'm usually using the term disability in the very broadest sense, which includes mental illness, physical illness, chronic conditions, neurodiversity, what happens to bodies through the natural process of aging. All of that and more can be under the umbrella of disability. And also, we know that ableism is rampant, along with all the other isms, with all the other antis, with all the other places that people feel othered, that they feel less than. Ableism is a huge part of that. And in terms of social justice, just about everything that you're doing now intersects with disability. You're already doing disability justice work. As I hear you talk about who you're feeding, who you want to have a roof over their head. When you're doing that, you're often serving and supporting and acknowledging the humanity of people with disabilities who haven't always had that happen and frequently on a daily basis are having interactions with people that are dehumanizing. So you're doing the work already of disability justice in everything you're doing. Just a reminder, Supposedly 20% of the population of the United States has a disability, according to the definition of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And people with disabilities, it's about 60%, live near or at the poverty line. So when you're feeding people, housing people, ensuring people have shelter, ensuring people don't have that one emergency, that can lead to completely sink them financially, lead to not being able to pay your rent, you're doing disability justice work. When you're working with refugees and immigrants, often with refugees, the conditions that led them to flee and the conditions they've lived in prior to even getting to this country often lead to disability. And people are coming from cultures where the attitudes towards disability are different. And how you welcome people here is important. Anything you're doing in terms of reproductive rights, the right for someone to control their own body is that's fundamental disability rights work. And that's including the right to reproduce or not, the rights to be a sexual being, to be free of, in our world, there's often mandatory sterilization that has happened and is actually still allowed in some places. That's also anything around reproductive justice is disability justice work. So I think I'm here to kind of say, if you're not seeing that there's a disability lens to what you're already doing, to maybe think about where it is and where you might be missing that, because it intersects with just about anything you might be doing under the label social justice. And if I depress people too much. But you're doing the work. Just as in the few minutes I heard you talking, you're doing that work.
Tammy, I'll just
Yeah.
interject and reflect that I really appreciate naming a disability lens, because I've heard so many other frames of how we should be thinking, and the way you're connecting the dots is really helpful for me.
Yeah. And there's lots of intersecting lenses, and we want to get all the different views. That's important.
Maybe before Jackie shares some information, I'm going to switch the order. And listening to what you have to say, Tammy, I'm thinking, what additional ways do you think we can work together? How can we support each other's work? So this would be a time when maybe we can spend about 5 minutes sharing some ideas.
You're also welcome to tell me everything I said was balderdash. That's fine too. I'm always open to pushback.
Thanks, Tammy. Questions about what Tammy said? Yeah, Adina.
It's not really a question. It's just a comment that
Sure.
so I'm a psychologist, mostly retired, and I had a few patients when I was working that were on disability. And one of the things that really struck me is, if you're on disability, you're below the poverty line. You don't get enough money from the government to really live. I mean, it's just very weird in terms of how this country treats people who are in need of that kind of support.
Yeah. And to be able to work, just to do the math on how much you can work and how much you can earn without putting your benefits in jeopardy, and that includes your health care, is really complicated, and it scares people off. And work is one of the ways that people feel they see their worth in the world. But the whole fear of jeopardizing healthcare is difficult.
Are there any times in your work as a social justice committee where you're now thinking about disabilities or inclusion in a different way, or has that come up? I'm not even sure how to ask the question, but I'm also thinking, what ways can we support you as you're doing your work, if you've got any questions?
I mean, my mind, I will say, jumps to the events. So for I know for Soup Kitchen, we're sure there's chairs, there's people to help less mobile individuals walk the line. But I'm thinking in terms of even the coming up with the environmental Dayenu events in April, this may be an added piece that, we can be more mindful. It may already be happening and there may be things we're not seeing yet that we could be doing.
I appreciate what you're saying, Lisa. And I think one thing we can all do is just continue to have these conversations and then notice if you, and, pay closer attention. And if you notice, contact us, somebody on our committee, or have conversations so we can make sure that we are always accessible and setting, providing opportunities where everyone feels like they belong and have a way to belong and have a way to participate.
And I would ask, just as you're looking at things, like here's an environmental issue. Well, what is the disability lens on this? The whole straws, if you got rid of all the plastic straws, it meant there were certain people with disabilities who could not go out to eat anymore. And it took a while for that to roll out because it hadn't been thought of. And then there's restaurants that do have plastic and paper straws because they've realized this, but it took a while for that to percolate to the surface. So it's also pausing to say, what are the implications for everyone versus what are the implications for most people? And that's kind of the inclusive piece.
Kimmy, any other examples? Because I feel like the example of the straws, something that many people are just not thinking about.
Oh, goodness. I've been reading lately stories of how a number of people who identify as disabled were far more prepared for the pandemic than the rest of society, and it's more the other end. So I'm trying to find the other example because I like the positive ones where um, people who have respiratory issues have masks all the time. And if you're living in high fire areas, especially along the West Coast, people already had masks. They already knew I need to stay in. I can't go out because of the level of ash in the air and pollutants in the air, knew how to shelter in place for weeks on end, already had mastered all the Zoom technology. That's what they were doing in their networks. Also, people in rural areas, I found, had already been using all these virtual methods of having meetings for years and years. And they were the ones saying, here's how you make masks. This is what you do with masks. I've already got some in my home. Like I've been collecting surgical masks because of not only do I have them, but I also have my own network of friends and we'll share and trade off with each other when we need them. So there's also a piece of there's a lot of creativity in the community of wow, you've been solving very unique problems in unique ways for quite a long time that we can learn from. But I know you're asking for more of let's remember this. That's the story that's been sitting with me lately.
Mm-hmm.
of where people we might want to ask, what are your ideas? Because they might be far more creative and interesting than anyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
I think another example I'm thinking about that's unrelated but may come up in the next few months is teens and asking them, what's next for you after high school? You know, not everybody is college bound. And so where are you going to college is a really pointed question. And to just think to change your language to, what do you think? What are your plans after high school? What are you excited about?
And asking their parents, oh, what are their plans after high school as well? Versus where making the assumption of college. That's a perfect one, Lisa. I love that.
I appreciate that, Lisa, because my daughter, who was not college bound, really struggled with it. And on her own, she came up with a plan and she said, I'm taking a gap year. and whatever it was, it just, it took, it just changed the course of the conversation. Yeah. So really sort of just checking out our own assumptions. And always being mindful and thoughtful, which many, many, many people at Beth Emmet do naturally anyhow. Well, thanks. I think it would be a good idea if we continue to have these conversations. And Lisa, I'll be in touch with you, and we'll figure out ways that, we can work to support each other. So it's 8:26. Jackie, can you spend a couple minutes talking about some of the upcoming events?
Sure. There's two coming up. One is Friday night, the 17th of February. Rabbi Sandra Cohn, who's going to give a presentation on I believe, mental health for Jewish acceptance, inclusion, disabilities awareness month. And it's a pre-recorded Devar Torah. I tried to listen to it because it said it's pre-recorded, but you can't listen to it until after she gives it Friday night. So that's it. And then I've been promoting at Kahal February 23rd, which is a week from Thursday. We're presenting Telling Tales, and there are 3 performers who have abilities, and they're going to give through vignettes stories of how they've overcome their challenges in life. It's from 5:15 p.m. till 6 or thereabouts, and it is also going to be live streamed. Not sure if they're going to record it or not. I haven't been given that yet, but it should be really interesting. And Telling Tales is a theatrical group that their performers are all with challenges, and that's how they tell their story, is through their performances. And that's about it so far.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
I think it was, I want to say thank you. As I was thinking of like our opening question and how to open the meeting, I didn't want to put people on the spot. Like, did you know Beth Emmet has an inclusion committee? But as like our opening question, but I am yes to all the applause because I'm so grateful we do. And I am really happy this opportunity, especially in the month of Jewish awareness for inclusion and disability, that we're able to lift this here because this is a group of people who want to be thoughtful and inclusive and may just need to know what we're not seeing at times and ask that question around a disability lens as we're engaging with others and planning projects and events and thinking about how we show up in the world. So a perfect match, and I look forward to continued partnership. So thank you for taking the time, Tammy. Thanks for logging on. Were there any other questions for Inclusion Committee or others before we close for the night?
I forgot to mention, this is a long way off, but in September last year, we merged, the Inclusion Committee merged with the Tzedakah Committee to do Soup Kitchen because they're two small groups, and it worked out really well. So I believe that's going to happen again this year for the Tzedakah and Inclusion Committee to do a Soup Kitchen in September sometime. That's far away though.
That's so wonderful to hear, because you're right. They're both small and mighty groups, but what a great opportunity to come together and do good together. So that's great to hear that's in the works.